is I think we have to future-proof our workforce, right? I think we have to help create an environment where people can experiment with AI, where they can get comfortable, where they can have a support structure, but where there is an expectation that they're going to use these tools and stay ahead of the curve because, frankly, things are moving so quickly. I think if you don't have that expectation, first of all, your company's going to fall behind. But secondly, I don't think you're doing your people a service. So when I think about our role, the way I'm really taking it is like I want to be making sure that we're creating a culture and an environment where people can experiment and use AI and get ahead of the curve and become even more efficient and probably sort of move up the strategic value chain in what they're doing, whatever domain they're in, because AI is enabling them to get so much time back.
What if your chief people officer insisted on personally raising the talent bar on every hire? In a 5,000 person remote first crypto company, and then asked AI to interview 1.5 million applicants a year. That's the world today's guest, LJ Brock, is actually running at Coinbase. LJ is the chief people officer at Coinbase and one of the most innovative HR leaders working right now. Before Coinbase, he led people at Citadel, helped build Red Hat, and like me, grew up in recruiting. Harvard Business School just did a case on Coinbase's culture and talent model for a reason. They're not just talking about new ideas, they're operationalizing them. In this episode, we dig into 3 big themes that matter for any leader who cares about talent. First, talent density. How LJ and his team built a system where executives review every hire, expectations rise every year in role, and raising the bar is everyone's job, not as a slogan, but as a lived, sometimes uncomfortable reality. Second, culture in a remote-first world. Why Coinbase went remote-first, not remote only. How hubs, surges, and intentional in-person moments keep the culture alive, and why authenticity now matters more than whatever glossy culture story you tell candidates. And third, AI and the future of HR. From AI agents interviewing every eligible applicant, to performance systems that actually surface real impact, to the hard questions underneath all of it is LJ's core belief. HR's real job is to help a company navigate uncertainty with honesty, ambition, and a very high bar for talent. If you're a CHRO, a CEO, a talent leader, or just trying to lead humans in a high change environment, this one's for you. LJ, great to see you. Welcome to the show. For the benefit of listeners, do you mind giving us a quick introduction for yourself?
Yeah. First of all, great to see you. Thanks for having me. So LJ Brock, for the last 7 years, I've been the chief people officer at Coinbase. And then before that, I was at Citadel, the hedge fund and market maker, as a chief people officer there for 3 years. And then prior to that, spent 8 years at Red Hat in enterprise software. Started there as the first head of global recruiting, grew into a larger role leading what we called HR infrastructure and part of our talent management team. And then started my career, I think like you, many, many years ago in recruiting, back in tech recruiting, including some shared experience at Sapient, longer ago than we would like to admit.
Long time. We were much younger back then.
Yes.
So let's talk about that for a minute, LJ. Having grown up in recruiting, how does that shape your focus in the job today?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I do think, in a chief people officer seat, particularly in a tech sector world, my leadership team really, really values recruiting as a differentiator in our overall people success function. So having come from that world firsthand, I think it helps me really add value to the executive team in a way where I can help them really you know, think through how do we do executive search well, how do we build great recruiting engine well, in a way that I think if I hadn't been hands-on would have been more difficult for me. I think any probably CPO wants to take a turn in really running a recruiting function for a period of time. When I started recruiting, I didn't think I wanted to be a CPO. I thought I just wanted to run recruiting. So I got really deep in that. And then the other thing I would say, Dan, is that you know, a hallmark for me, or I think a way I think about success is just building a team that's better than me. So I've been using that recruiting muscle just to help really build a great people success function at Coinbase by hiring really great experts that can do great work across Coinbase.
You were early in creating the talent density framework, and it's now something that many organizations are trying to mimic or model after. Um, how does it work internally? And do you think coming up in TA is part of what allowed you to be so successful in creating it?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know, honestly, if I call us early in it in so much as I think a lot of companies probably were doing a talent density agenda one way or the other. I think what was maybe really significantly different for us is that we were willing to be so overt and authentic about what we were going to do and how we were going to go about doing it. And I think for two reasons, we did that on purpose because we thought of it as bat signal to really share with people the standards we were going to set and how we were going to get to those standards. And we thought the right kind of people would be excited and opt into that. And then we thought probably people who weren't excited and didn't opt in probably weren't going to enjoy working at Coinbase anyway. So I think the differentiator for us there was more about how we went to market with it so publicly. Um, I do think coming up through talent was helpful again because a big pillar of the way we've gone about talent density is substantive changes to our recruiting process. In introducing extra assessments, introducing reviews by our executive team on every hire. And so being able to work with the recruiting team, because honestly, this was for them, they were worried about it too, right? Like you had the organization worried, what does this mean? And then you had the recruiting team worried about, how is this going to impact our success? I think being able to sort of speak to them from having been in the seat was really beneficial in helping us get through that transition and be successful in this.
And today, is it a framework or is it a central part of the culture?
I think it's both. I mean, we do have a talent density framework. We have pillars that we focus on, but I think the framework and the pillars have really permeated the culture. I think the organization, at the end of the day, the most simple way to think about this is we want to constantly raise the talent bar. And I do think that we have done a great job of pushing through the entire org a sense of everybody's responsibility towards raising that talent bar. So I think the org, we're still on a journey. And the interesting thing, Dan, is, and I think about this, I'm not sure you can ever declare victory and step back. I think the minute you do that, probably the bar starts creeping back and people sort of revert. So even though I do think it's permeated our culture and central to the way we operate, I don't know that we're going to ever just say, "Great, mission accomplished. We'll go back to normal, whatever that is." I think we'll keep the framework. We'll keep iterating on the pillars. We'll keep pushing the work that raises the bar inside the company, whether it be in hiring or talent management, to make sure that we never sort of slide backwards.
Clearly, candidates experience it, and the bar is high. You're driving it into talent management. Do people feel it every day? And if so,
I think
how?
they do. Yeah. So I think, look, in the hiring process, they feel it every day. Again, we have if you're interviewing with us, there's a set of assessments you go through. We have a very detailed review of every offer. So, we're going to hire well over 1,000 people in 2025. And one of several of us on the executive team have reviewed every single one of those hires and given them an approval at the end. So there's a lot of work that permeates the org to make sure that people really feel like, hey, this is somebody worthy of Brian or Emily or LJ saying, hey, yeah, this is a hire for Coinbase. And then I think from a talent management perspective, what you see in the organization is an expectation that we're going to have rising expectations within a role within over year. And so what you see, I think what people experience is a world where there's no sort of just sit back and stay at the same level of output and the same level of efficiency. You've got to keep pushing yourself to meet the moment as the company gets better and as the company pushes a high, the talent bar up. So I think people do experience it every day here.
So you've been CHRO in open source tech in financial services and a hedge fund. You ran talent in, in technology firms. You've now been a CHO in crypto. You've sort of seen it all. How have you seen culture evolve over the years?
I think of this more in terms of how long I've been doing it than the industry. So, when I think about like when you and I were working together in the late '90s, early 2000s, as I've looked back and tried to sort of look at history and consider it, I think that was a period of time when companies really first started thinking about cultivating culture as a differentiation point to win great talent. I mean, cultures existed, companies had cultures, but I think, executives were really leaning into in that first dot-com bubble, hey, our culture is a reason why you should come work here.
Yes, and by that,
I
it was the
think what,
first time where culture was starting to be defined as something almost tactile that you could feel. It was more than
yes,
just words on a wall. It was something that you
yeah.
could feel and experience and actually articulate.
So what I've seen change, I totally agree with that. And what I've seen change over time is, and I don't know how you reflect on this, but I think it was so fresh, it was so exciting, it was tactile that I think, frankly, there was a little bit of an over rotation. So I think for a period of time, it was like you were more focused on cultivating the culture than you maybe were on business outcomes. I remember when I worked, you and I worked at Sapient. I remember that we would pass on a candidate because we would say they weren't a cultural fit. They would go work at one of our competitors and get staffed on business that we lost because we didn't have someone to do the work.
Yep.
And there was this little bit of an imbalance, right? You wanted to maintain the culture, you wanted to have a high bar, but at times I think we were losing commercially over the culture. As I worked through my career, I think Red Hat did a little bit of a better job on that, where there was certainly a very robust culture. And the thing about Red Hat was I do think there's a good balance between commercial and focus on culture, but I also think the culture was a little bit it sort of slowed things down in its nature a little bit. When I was at Citadel, it was much more of a function on commercial outcomes than culture, I think, which is great because if you're investing people's money, you're probably largely focused on commercial outcomes. When I think about where we sit today at Coinbase, I really feel like we've struck an amazing balance between cultivating a culture, but knowing that we have to have great commercial outcomes. And I would say the other thing that I've seen over time, which I think is an outcome of just having savvier candidates, savvier workforce, and just the nature of technology, is authenticity is more important than culture. So I think in the beginning, you could sort of paint a culture that maybe people were going to experience or not. You were trying to put your best foot forward, the culture that someone might experience on their very best day. Today, we think about authenticity. We take great pride. The number one stat I take pride in our engagement survey is 93% of our people say that what they thought they were getting into, the brand promise, is the brand experience. So we
Wow.
go out of our way to make sure that we're not saying like on our very, very best day, this is what Coinbase is like. This is what our average day is like. And if you like it, join. And if you don't, that's okay. And I think that's a big evolution in the culture and part of, the chief people officer role in HR in general.
So you've emphasized culture, you've built this talent density framework and married the two beautifully. Coinbase was an early adopter of remote first. And you've set up hubs. How do you preserve the culture? If someday Harvard's going to take a look at this and say, okay, you have an organization that is incredibly performance driven, that has been driven by a talent density framework where people constantly have to push themselves, where you're sort of very open and saying, if it doesn't fit for you, we're going to wish you luck and let you be successful elsewhere. And you've brought humanity into the process where every part of the leadership team plays a part in hiring and beyond. People are remote first, and now you have AI, and Coinbase has been at the forefront of leveraging AI. How does all of that come together?
Well, first of all, I'm proud to say it's not even someday that Harvard's going to do it. They just did it. I was there last week. They did a case on us. I was there with them. It was great. You can share it with you at some point. It'll be a good read.
Did you ever think when you were
Look,
at Albany that someday you'd be sitting at Harvard, they'd be doing a case about you?
no, I thought there's a good joke. First of all, no, I never thought I'd be on at Harvard writing a case when I was at Albany. And I tell you, the other joke that I have is, when I worked at Citadel, and I used to sometimes sit with Ken Griffin and review resumes of candidates about whether they were, appropriate for um, the bar at Citadel or not. And maybe one of the few good laughs that Ken and I enjoyed together over the time we were there was me making a joke with him about the absurdity of my SUNY Albany background, sharing with him, he and I looking at these resumes coming to Citadel and me deciding who could, were they at the bar or not. So anyway, to your question on culture and how we keep it alive. First thing is, uh, and you said it in the question, remote first. So we make a big point about remote first, not remote only. And that was one of the things we laid out very early in our foundation when we went remote. That that while we believed remote had some huge benefits, which we can talk about, we also knew that just being entirely remote wasn't going to work for us. So over a period of time, we've had iterations on how we go about it. But one of the ways that we really focus on preserving the culture is we still do bring people together at some interval, at some size, and different. Now we're building these hubs, so it'll be in office. That's part of the secret, I think, doing it in a world where, you're not at a generic spot like a conference center or a hotel, but you're doing it in a office space that also perpetuates your culture. So I think intentionality is the key there. And then I think, we do a lot of things. We have regular monthly or quarterly town hall meetings. We highlight a cultural tenet. Brian takes one cultural tenet every town hall, reviews it in detail, shares experiences with it, talks about what it is and what it isn't. That's really important when you're, bringing in 1,000 new people a year and you want to make sure you're inculcating them in your culture. Um, we have culture awards. We focus on highlighting people who do great work in not just the what, but how they go about doing it. And then I would say our performance management really focuses on balancing the what and the how. So, we're very focused on delivery and outcomes, but we're also focused on making sure that the people who do that are living our culture in the right way. And so when you put all that together in person at times, hot, executive focus, talent management. You put all that together and you can still cultivate a culture, I think, remotely and then get the benefits of being remote.
I wonder, I'd love your view on this, LJ. Oftentimes we manage the lowest common denominator. And when we talk to CEOs, they're obsessed with getting people back in the office. And it's always based on this belief that people aren't working hard enough, people are going to the gym too much. You guys have made it work. Is it because do you think there is this talent density framework where you are hiring the best, people are driven, people are motivated, they have to continue to push themselves? And so you have this underlying expectation that you're hiring the best of the best and they're going to be self-starting and responsible and all of those things that other organizations are worried they're not getting at home.
Yeah, so I think a lot about this. I think there's a few things. I mean, first of all, I think if you believe that you spent years and years and years talking about talent matters, having the very best people is going to win. I mean, if you believe that, I do think it's very difficult to extrapolate that, like doing that only in a few geographies where people are in with commutable distance is really the way to win. So I think one of the reasons it's working for us is because the addressable market's just so large, right? I mean, we can really hold, a very an even higher bar because it's not who is the best person who's in commuting distance to downtown San Francisco or New York. It's who is the best person to do this. And frankly, that's becoming a bigger and bigger differentiator for us every day as other companies waffle or full on reverse on remote. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is, yeah, look, we have a very high intensity culture. When we first went remote for a period of time, we were doing quarterly performance checks to make sure that people were on track. We've now dialed that back to twice a year, but we have other checks for new hires when they first come on. We do quarterly OKR. So I think the cadence of our business and the large aspirations we have and the fact that we try to tackle a lot means that it's very demanding. And if you're not putting in the time, you're just not going to be able to be successful, right? The performance management system is gonna identify that. So look, maybe you can hide for 6 months. Maybe I'm very, very skeptical of that, but maybe you can. But the system's going to catch up with you because of the high standards we have. And then I would just say, look, Coinbase, first of all, was one of the most in-person tech companies in the world pre-COVID, and I had only worked in person my whole career really before. And I sort of challenge this idea that as a manager, I had some great idea what my employee was doing just because we were in the same building. Truth is, I was moving from floor to floor, going from meeting to meeting. They were doing the same. So the idea that like I was on top of their every moment and was really ensure that they were delivering any more so or less so than I am today, I think is kind of a flawed theory in general. So I think, we're still seeing that we have very high production and output. And we don't need to be in the office for that. We do see value of being in the office for creative moments, but it's less about being in the office because of productivity or output.
Well, I would agree with you, and I think part of why there was the trend of managing people's badging in and out speaks to that. It, sort of an acknowledgement that I have no idea what people are doing during the day, but at least I know when they're coming in and when they're going home, which is how we used to lead.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
how do you continue to encourage and enable personal connection in a remote first culture? Is it through the hubs? Is it through the quarterly meetings? How do you make that still possible?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, we've said we have an aspiration that everybody will get together in person in some form or another once a quarter. Right now, we're really focused. There's a lot going on in crypto. There's a lot of opportunity. We're doing things called surges right now, where we're bringing teams together on our highest priority work for a period of a week, where they're really tackling meaty problems, designing new outcome, maybe new product designs or key for key deliverables or launch times. So you get a lot of in-person connection doing the work, and then often, there's a celebration at the end of the week to do that. So we have just the natural rhythm and cadence of the work allows us to drive connection. We also have stipends and just tools for people to get together in the geographies they're in, both maybe, if they want to get together to do work, or if they just want to get together socially. We have, as I said, we do virtual events where we bring teams together to drive connection. So, it's sort of a sum of the parts thing for us, right? Like there's no single one thing that drives connection, but when you have an intense world where you are coming together for work, you get connection out of that. If you aren't experiencing that, maybe then you are getting together using one of our stipends for a personal connection. At the year end, we're going to have holiday parties. People are able to fly in and attend those holiday parties if they want. So, we're really working on a litany of avenues for people to make sure they get in-person connection. And what I find, when we did I had my entire HR team in New York in September, I think it was for a week. And that was both that's a little bit of a draining week because you're on for a whole week with everybody and you got breakfast, lunch, dinner all day, all night but you find you get these incredible connection points. You sort of, you're really re-engaged people. Then you go back and that sort of sustains you while you're back remote for a period of time. And then you do another one a quarter later of some fashion. And that kind of cadence of regular connection and then going back and being focused, we've built a muscle where that's a really good sort of way for us to work, I think, for the most part.
Fascinating. And what we hear is it's working brilliantly. So you have been at the forefront of innovation now for probably 10 years, one of the most innovative HR leaders out there. You've created talent density framework, you've created remote first, you've created hubs, you've created this culture, an incredible amount happening in crypto, and now AI comes in. What how do you see, number one, what is HR's role in the AI revolution? What is it going to mean for employees at Coinbase? And where do you see it enhancing or potentially eroding culture?
Let's see, there's a lot there. So HR role, I'd say the way I think about this, uh, um, I think AI is absolutely amazing. I think it's an incredible period of time to be, you know, early or mid in your career because I think it's going to just shape things in a way that'll just be unbelievably amazing for people. I do think the way I think about this personally, and then I think that transcends probably the way our team is operating from an HR perspective, um, is I think we have to future-proof our workforce, right? I think we have to help create an environment where people can experiment with AI, where they can get comfortable, where they can have a support structure, but where there is an expectation that they're going to use these tools and stay ahead of the curve because, frankly, things are moving so quickly I think if you don't have that expectation, first of all, your company's going to fall behind. But secondly, I don't think you're doing your people a service. So when I think about our role, the way I'm really taking it is like I want to be making sure that we're creating a culture and an environment where people can experiment and use AI and get ahead of the curve and become even more efficient and probably sort of move up the strategic value chain in what they're doing, whatever domain they're in, because AI is enabling them to get so much time back. And so I just see that as sort of central. Now, within the HR function, we're definitely taking some big hacks at like how can we really, really push the envelope. We have a goal, and I think we'll hit it, that every candidate who applies in eligible regions by January 1 will go through an AI agent will interview them.
So
And that
conversational
I think,
AI, full-fledged, full interview.
yeah. And the reason for that, Dan, is for us, this is why I talk about the unbelievable power of this technology. All this debate around it, and as with any technology, there's pluses and minuses. But for us, we're on track to get 1.5 million applicants in 2025. So there's no world where we were going to build a recruiting team that could interview 1.5 million applicants. And so for me, the promise of AI was, what if there's a button that says interview now when you apply, and you get to actually interview, yes, with a virtual agent, but it's giving you a chance to add to your profile by actually going through the first screen, and getting able to sort of differentiate yourself that way. And so I just see this as an incredible technology for democratizing and making, a far greater reach. And that's just one example of the way we're thinking about it.
Isn't it fascinating? When we were coming up and LinkedIn first came around, there was this idea that it was going to free up time and give you more time to sift through and spend with candidates and engage. And in the end, it's all of those technologies have allowed for such volume that now we need technology to disintermediate the technology, because
Yes.
instead of getting 1,000 applicants, you're getting 1.5 million, because it's, number one, it's a great brand. It's a great place to develop a career. It's a mission-based organization where you could do well and do good. And it's also easy enough that someone can apply to 1,000 companies in 5 minutes. And so now we need technology to sort of get back through that, to some point, get humanity back into the process.
Yeah. And I think that's the incredible power of it. And I mean, look, we're working hard to make it, a really a great experience for everyone too. Where people, and in general, we're seeing, great stats from people mid 80s on like, hey, this is a really an experience I would want to go through, and that's still early in our iteration on it. So, I think the technology can really help solve what you're talking about, that this sort of other technology create a volume problem for.
Where else are you using it? So you're using it, so you'll have a front end interview. I would imagine other use cases.
Yeah, we've got it laced through the recruiting process. We're experimenting with resume review. We're experimenting with vendor Bright Hire on interview note capture, and then more broadly across HR, I would say, we've had great success in a chat bot for our HR ops team to help defer tickets and human interaction, where people are basically getting answers themselves to their key questions, employees. So it's sort of driving up efficiency of that team. And then I think we'll see it help us. We're doing a lot of experiments right now in our performance management in helping with uh, annual review writing. Like, you remember, everybody faces this terrible problem of like, you sit down and you're like, oh my God, I got to write my own self review for the year. What are all the things I did? And I can tell you, I mean, at Coinbase, I don't know what I did in Q1. I mean, I can't even tell. If I had to write down right now for Emily, what did I accomplish in Q1? I couldn't do it. I'd have to go back and scour my calendar. Well, now there's a tool that's going to be able to help us identify what were the areas that we accomplished, what were the things that we were focused on. So I think there'll be a lot across our performance system in terms of um, review writing, review analysis, and then ultimately maybe even helping us identify where there are, questionable outcomes or divergent outcomes. So, if you imagine again, now you got a 5,000 person company. As a CHRO, you want to make sure that the right actions are taking place as a result of performance, that the people who made outsized impact really are getting rewarded. The people who maybe weren't performing well really have been identified. At scale, the same way at 5,000, I'm not going to go through 5,000 reviews. Just not going to happen. But now we're going to have a tool that's going to help us see where there might be some areas to dive in and have more human inspection across that 5,000. Yeah, I think we will see that too.
And you're encouraging employees to leverage it, to use it in their day job, figure out, be creative. It's fascinating, Elsa. You talk to, and you have a young daughter who came off campus a year ago. At college, you use chat and it's considered cheating. And so we want this next generation, which should be AI native, is growing up that using it is cheating. We have companies that still look at it and say, well, if someone's using it to write a document, they're not really using their own words, their own energy. So they're cheating. They're not doing their job. How do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually one of the great questions to navigate. This is, I mean, it's one of these like sounds sort of maybe a little easy, but then gets really difficult. I would say on the recruiting end, we're trying to be again, for us, authenticity is everything. On the recruiting side, we're trying to be clear with people where we do want them to use it, where it's okay, and where we don't, right? So there are some things where like, hey, this is an area where using AI would be cheating. We want to see your work product, right? Be it on an assessment or something of that nature. Then we do have a sort of a capstone part of our recruiting process where people do a presentation, and we would say to them like, if you're not using AI, you're probably not right for us because we would use AI to do that presentation. So we try to be very clear on like where is it okay, where is it not. I think in both cases, there are times probably in any hiring process where you may want to know the individual is doing something. You want to evaluate them and not the AI. But I also think trying to say to people, don't use AI, um, you know, again, you're right. We want an AI enabled workforce. So why would I want to hire? Why would I want to, portray to people they're not going to use AI as part of our process? We do ask employees to use it to help them. And, one of the things that allowed us to go remote and be so successful, I think, is because we're a heavy written documentation culture, but different than maybe some other companies, not judged by volume, actually judged by being clear and concise. Don't say in 5 words what you could say in 4, et cetera. And so this is actually where we're seeing AI really, I think, enable clear communication in a way that takes maybe people who wouldn't have been in the upper quartile around clear communication, and it gives them a leg up because now they have a tool to help crisp up their thoughts and really be successful in our written documentation culture. Same likewise, I use AI to help synthesize all the written documents I get and help me get more done in the same day. So yeah, we're pushing employees to use it. We want to be clear. We believe, look, Coinbase is a group of optimists. We see the power of technology as really being positive on the planet and having and really a positive force for change. We want our people to be able to embrace that and really experience it in their work.
Is it part of your leadership development curriculum? Are you training managers and leaders to lead differently in the age of AI?
We haven't so much shifted yet to a leadership development framework, but I do think there's a very interesting leadership question that we will have to address, which is, you know, we have all grown up in a world where part of leadership is typically characterized, even if it's not articulated in the framework, about being able to take on larger and larger teams and then drive those teams to success. And I think the interesting thing about AI is that the whole idea of making your team larger is actually going to get challenged, right? I mean, the opposite may be true. You may be able to get more done with a smaller team today. So I think one of the leadership paradigms that I think we're going to have to work on with leaders in general is, how do we differ? How do we identify great performance, and how do we move people forward who are getting more done with technology and less and not as large teams? I mean, there's at least my entire career, so 25 plus years, growing a company by headcount and then leaders having larger and larger teams was a hallmark of success.
Interesting. There's been some talk online, and a few mutual friends have been pushing this idea that HR needs to be replaced, that it's no longer human resource. It's going to be human and, digital resource or AI resource, et cetera. And it is going to be a new leadership paradigm for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I go tough to be inside to say, hey, it should be replaced, but you got to be open-minded. I think it's more about, though, to me, helping the workforce navigate what will be this massive digital transformation or this AI transformation. And then, how do those two things work in conjunction, and how do you make an even more efficient, more effective workforce? I think there's a lot of work to be done there, with an HR team, or maybe there'll be a new term for it, but with similar skill sets.
How are we in the first inning? And obviously, you guys are at the cutting edge of tech. Are we in the first inning? Are we in the third inning?
Oh my God, smarter minds than my SUNY Albany degree would have to answer that for you. But if it was me, I'd call it like top of the first inning, like first batter. I think we're um, very, very early on. And again, been fortunate to go through this career journey with you. While I'm extraordinarily optimistic about AI, and while I do think AI will have an incredible impact on HR functions, and I do think we're seeing it early, I also have been through this enough where, like, I remember the first wave of every technology isn't ultimately the one that really makes everything that much better. I laugh with my team, and maybe it's just that, I've had bad luck, or maybe I just haven't been very good at this. But I mean, I remember the first scheduling tool that was supposed to, like, scour Outlook and make eradicate the recruiting coordinator function, or make it so you only need one recruiting coordinator for thousands of interviews. And that was in the early 2000s. I'm still sitting here waiting for that to really work, right? Like, I mean, so I know that time will shake out that some of these early things that we think are wins probably won't be the big wins, but I do think ultimately there will be some really transformational change here. So that's why I think we probably are in the very beginning, first inning.
But I'm still celebrating the electric typewriter. Remember sitting at the kitchen table and typing
Yeah,
book reports, and you'd make a typo and have to rip out the paper and start over. I'm still embracing
I
that
mean,
that innovation.
I was visiting my mom a while ago. I think she still has my old brother word processor up on her in her
Smith
office.
Corona.
So yeah, yeah,
That was life changing.
it was.
So where do you see HR going in the next 5 to 10 years? How, people are talking about all these dramatic changes. Obviously, the world is changing. How dramatically has your role shifted in the last, let's say, 10 years, and how dramatically do you think it'll shift in the next 10?
Um, Look, I think people talk about the role changing dramatically. I think aspects of the role change dramatically, where you're focused change dramatically. Like, what are the sort of the areas that, like, the business community or CEOs are really zeroed in on. Uh, that'll change. But I'll tell you, to me, the thing that I, looking back now, realize is that the underlying principle that I think a CHRO, at least in tech and financial services, from what I've experienced, has to think about is that there is no certainty. I think you have to build a muscle to embrace uncertainty. The flavors of that uncertainty will vary over time. They've varied dramatically over the last 10 years. I mean, no more so than when you saw COVID happen. That sparked a set of changes that were just unbelievable. But I think that for me, what has sort of helped me be somewhat successful over this journey in the CHRO seat has been this belief that there is no such thing as certainty, that the only thing you can do is build a muscle to be successful in navigating the uncertainty, and to really embrace that as a moment of learning, and as a moment of, like, being able to sort of reinvent what you and your team do to add value to the business that you're working in. So I think the last 10 years has been one of tremendous uncertainty. I think the next 10 years will probably be the same. Um, if I had to bet, the things that I see really playing out more and more now, the thing that we're betting on and embracing every day more and more, is authenticity as sort of the running theme that allows us to do the best work we can in an HR world. Again, I just think of, job seekers or workers in your company are just so much more savvy. They have so much more information. It's so much easier for them to sift through any bullshit in the world, that you have to make authenticity the center of the way you approach HR. And I think if you do that, you can navigate a lot of change. So my belief is that authentic, being more transparent, being okay with the fact that some people will like who you are and some people won't, I think will probably be a trend that you see more and more in HR. It's my hunch. It's worked for us. What I would say is every time we have done something where people have said to me, don't do that, you're going to regret it, the opposite has been true because we just stood out. Um, we were being true to who we were, and people saw that, and then they, it worked out well for us. I'm sure some people didn't want to be here, and that's okay. I wouldn't want to twist their arm here, but by being so authentic, I think we got a lot of great people who do want to be here, and then we're higher powered for it. So I think that's one thing I see as a big trend, and then probably, um, look, as we've been talking all the way through this, exactly how it plays out, I'm uncertain. I think AI will only amplify as a trend. I think there'll probably be some real battles around AI as it changes the workforce.
So last question, Elsie, which ties into it. If you think about HR the last 40 years, there was the period of we were personnel. Then it moved to the Pepsi, we're not planning a company picnic, and it was sort of HR getting more hard ass. Then there was the moment of HR as the business partner, the seat at the table, the dark ears. Then there was HR as the consigliere, speaking truth to power. What are we now in the next 10 years? Is it HR as the chief innovation officer, HR as the talent strategist? What era are we entering into?
Um, you know, I have a little bit of a different paradigm on this, just to answer it, which is like, I think we'll know. I remember all these phases. You and I have talked about all of these phases. I've talked to my peers about all these phases. I think we'll know we've won, if you will, when we're not any of that, when we're just part of the team and we're helping solve for like what's ever facing the business. So I think one of the things that's actually plagued us, in my estimation, is this desire to be labeled as like we are this really big thing. I don't know. I don't talk to Alicia, our CFO, and she says the CFO is the this or the. I talk to my product team. We're all just part of a team. We have our areas of expertise. Those areas of expertise get, you have to play out and leverage those muscles differently depending on what's happening in the business. Look, I do think our area of expertise is around the acquisition, development, deployment, maximizing talent. I do think that's our area of expertise that generally I see us, at least at Coinbase, really playing the highest value. But exactly how that expertise evolves over time, and what that means we get labeled as, I don't know. I don't think it's chief innovation officer in the sense that, like, I think a lot of people help drive innovation, right? And I think one of the things that drives that is having great talent in there. So I wouldn't expect that I'd be sitting around 10 years from now thinking of myself as the chief innovation officer for a company. I do think that I would be sitting around saying, I have an expertise around people and talent, and I'm going to help deploy that in the way that's most useful for the enterprise that I'm supporting, that really drives towards mission achievement. So, Dan, if I could hope for anything, I'd say in 10 years, we've gotten past needing a label and we're just part of the team and we're doing great work and people value it.
Are different type of people filling the jobs?
I think that is true. I'll tell you, I've seen, um, I think there's a wider range of people. I don't think there's one answer here either. I think there are people who have grown up in HR from early in career and they've had a wide set of experiences and they are doing really well. I have seen some people and personally, like on multiple occasions, pursued having team members who have come from different disciplines, management consulting or marketing, or and they come and they bring a great expertise. So I do think the function has evolved such that you can have a wider set of people who are potentially right to come in. I still think it's very valuable to, wherever your background was before you joined, before you become a CHRO, I think it's valuable to get some time in several of the disciplines. I spend a lot of time rotating my teams. I mean, our senior people are in seat 18, 24 months, and then we usually rotate them around. And I think that's helping us build some great CHROs, and we've been fortunate to see some people move on and take other jobs. And I think that's a great outcome for us. So I think there's a wider set of skills today that could probably come in and be successful. I think that's a good thing for the function. I think that diversity makes us stronger. Um, and what it is in the future may be somebody who's even more tech savvy than any of us have been, just because of the role that AI plays in it. I could certainly see a world where people even have a stronger affinity towards and capability and around technology being even more successful in the future.
Has that started to sprinkle into your recruiting for HR?
Well, what I would say sprinkled in right now for me a little differently. I mean, we have an HR, I think a different kind of HR tech team. Um, I don't say different like we're the only ones doing it, but different than I've had in my past, where it's probably been more of a team that was supporting whatever enterprise tool or couple of tools you had on the back end. We have much more of a team now that is really driven on by innovation and I think product management, really trying to. One thing I think doesn't work, at least in what I'm seeing right now, you can't have COE leaders. You can't have your head of talent, your head of rewards, and your head of business partners and everything trying to do all the work with their clients, which is so demanding, and also be on the front end of like what's happening in the AI world. So we've built effectively an HR tech innovation team to go work with me and my senior team, prioritize where we want to drive innovation and go be on the front end of that. And I think they're taking much more of a product management and technology lens than I've seen other teams I've had in the past. I can't, maybe others have been doing this and I'm slow to uptake, but I think that is changing the way we operate. And I do think we'll hire, we're hiring some different people or from some different backgrounds into those teams.
And that AI innovation team, are they curating ideas? Or have they built sort of an AI ecosystem to tap into? Obviously, headquartered in San Francisco, but remote first. Your team is everywhere. Are they tapping into the leaders of the best AI companies, and have they built that? Is that the model you've employed?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, so yes, they've done a great job, I think, of surveying the market and keeping on top of like, I mean, the amount of vendors out there, as I'm sure you're aware, in the HR tech space. I mean, I think there are some really truly native AI companies, and then every other company that existed, 24, 36 months ago just said, now we're an AI company, added AI to their whatever they were. And so now you got that coming at you. Um, so, I think they've done an incredible job of surveying the landscape. I'm sure there's some that they're not on top of, but whenever I meet with them, I meet with them on a very regular basis. They do a great job of saying, "Oh, we've seen that, we've looked at that, we've demoed this, we're on top of that." They know of every idea I get from others in my network before I ever, I've never sent them something that they're like, "Never heard of that." Um, so they're doing a really good job there. And then what we're doing is really deploying a strategy of where do we need to be uniquely differentiated and might we build something on our own? We don't want to do a ton of building on our own. That's terrible to support. But if the market's not going to yield something, then we might build something on our own. And then what they've been doing a really good job of, I think, is looking for vendors who we can be an early partner with and really shape the product in some way towards what we're looking to do. So where we play sort of because of our willingness to adopt and our willingness to, work with these vendors to really help have, a somewhat outsized influence on the roadmap of the product because we're on the tip of the sword actually using the product, giving that feedback. And I think that's allowed us to sort of, get some of these running head starts because we've been working with these vendors, and they're hearing from us what we're trying to do, and then that's helping us, accelerate what we're trying to get done because they're incorporating that into their products.
Fascinating. Well, LJ, I feel like we could do it for a few more hours. We haven't even talked about your tennis game yet. Um,
That
we
would only take
we
5 minutes, but yeah.
That would be interesting to cover. We haven't really even talked about board service, and we've been talking for years about the value of putting the right HR leaders on boards. I think you are the poster child of kind of next generation talent strategist, talent visionary, AI HR visionary, and the value that you could add in the right boardroom. I think is almost immeasurable. I think there's so many additional things we could talk about for days.
Well, I like the idea of what you just said on the board conversation because it's the only thing I could actually be the next generation in at this point. So otherwise, I'm at the last generation. So that sounds interesting.
It is scary. This, by the way, this is a step back in time. I'm going to pretend we're back in our 20s having this conversation.
Yeah, that would be great.
But LJ, listen, this was fascinating. I think listeners are going to love hearing the journey, hearing you talking about talent density, you talking about culture, you talking about remote first, you talking about AI, just about everything that is happening in the world that is innovative, that is forward looking. You're at the you are the tip of the spear. So really, really appreciate you you coming in, you spending the time. Fascinating. Appreciate you sharing. And for all the listeners, obviously this will be available on our zergpartners.com website and all of the podcast platforms. But LJ, thank you.
Yeah, hey, it was great to be here. Thanks for asking me. And it wouldn't be fair for me not to say that, I have a great leadership team at the company and a great team in the in HR. So when you say I'm driving all this innovation, I'm fortunate to have a group that like really supports it at a company level and an incredible team that actually makes it all come alive. So it's just sort of being a conduit between the two makes it a lot easier and a lot of fun. But great seeing you, Dan. Thanks for doing this.
You too, LJ. A pleasure.